First double game week of the year coming thick and fast. Welcome back to Bazball FPL. Today I want to touch on, I think, where managers may be getting unstuck over the next couple weeks. But before we touch on that, and before we touch on some of the fool's gold that I think I'm seeing with some FPL managers at the moment, I want to quickly touch on my team. Another disappointing game week, 62 points, well under the safety score of around 71 points. That dropped me down from about 7,500 2 weeks ago to 16,715. So not a disaster, but clearly losing ground. A big component of that was me captaining Gabriel. You know, it was a differential when you looked at where managers were going. Majority going on Bruno with a 10-pointer and a goal. Not helping me, Christian Romero. But upon reflection, and it's always hindsight, but Gabriel was a bit of a punt. Going against managers always looks good when it comes off, not so much when it doesn't. But look, upon reflection, probably a low ceiling captain for that game week, reinforcing that you really do need to go with your gut and go with captains that just really have that goal threat within that specific week. You know, I don't mind going against Haaland because I don't think he's actually ever scored at Anfield before yesterday. So I don't mind that. But, you know, I was watching that United game and Bruno just looked like he could have scored 3 or 4 if given the right opportunity. So I don't think this was bad luck. I think this was more bad judgment on my end. But looking forward, you know, there's potentially me going to Gabriel again tomorrow night, not only for a captain, but potentially a triple captain. And this week has left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, and I think I may have to remove this week and look at game week 26 with completely new judgment, but it is lingering in the back of my mind. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. But outside of double game weeks, I don't know if I'll captain Gabriel again this year. You know, I think there's enough firepower in my team to go with different options. And look, if the fixture presents itself, it's always going to be an option, but potentially locking me out for the rest of the season with different options. So looking at my team, the transfer and selection, I wouldn't call them mistakes, but I went one side of variance, and again, it didn't come off. I went Wirtz instead of Mbeumo. Look, I knew that Mbeumo obviously had the better fixture than Wirtz did against Man City, but I thought Wirtz actually had a really good chance of coming away with some sort of return. Mbeumo, you know, United from an attacking perspective look incredible at the moment. So, yeah, just wrong side of variance, and I'm hoping that Wirtz, with some really great fixtures after Sunderland away this weekend, sort of makes up that discrepancy of what I missed out on the weekend. Wilson, couple blanks now, becoming a little bit of an issue, you could say, and especially with Man City this week, and I'll go to my team selection later in the video. But after Man City, if we actually go and have a look in here, you know, Sunderland away, again, probably not the best fixture, but if we go to long-term fixtures after that, Tottenham at home, West Ham home, Nottingham Forest away, Burnley home, like there's some great fixtures to target. So it's a bit of a wait and hold for Wilson at the moment, which isn't great, but just the way that it is at the moment. I guess definitely not an emergency to transfer out. Again, just sort of having to hold him. Rice, yes, he got a DEFCON and a clean sheet, but that sort of ceiling has seemed to remove from him. There hasn't been any attacking returns since Bournemouth, which is somewhat starting to worry me as to what that triple Arsenal should and could look like. Look, these are all small decisions, but when you start to stack them together, they can cost my rank. And as you can see, you know, I've slid down 9,000 in rank over the last couple weeks. So, looking ahead for the next 3 to 4 game weeks, and I think this is where some managers are starting to get a little bit trapped, is they're trying to fix for the here and now. And I know that may be actually the best way and best path forward, but knowing what we have lying ahead with a Dead-End 31 and some blanks and doubles in game week 32, 33, and I think it's 36 also. I think a lot of people are sort of solving for the here and now right now as opposed to forward thinking. So although I'm starting to and have slipped down the rank over the last couple weeks, it has been a bit of a rock and a hard place for me, whereas it's fixing the present versus protecting the future. And for me, it's protecting the future at the moment. It's clearly not working, but I'm hoping that I'll come out the other side in those later fixtures, because I did sort of protect for later down the track. Look, I am still committed to a Dead-End 31, as I think most are. However, where I think, as I alluded to and touched on earlier in the video, where people are sort of getting that fool's gold, is I've still seeing a lot of transfer activity. I did watch an expert video from FPL Focal today, and 50 odd % of the experts were rolling their transfers. So the experts are rolling, and I'm certainly no expert, but I'm going to be looking to potentially roll this week as well. So, you know, this short-term pain for now means hopefully fuel fires later, and I guess that's the way in which I'm thinking about it. So yes, some bad luck over the last couple of weeks, but you know, the captaincy avoidance of going Bruno did more damage, I think, than the variance of some transfers and just some overall bad luck. I think luck hurts some of you game weeks over the last 2 to 3, but sort of the bad decisions of me potentially trying to chase it from here could hurt my season. And I think the big one is whether triple captain comes into play for this week, which I'm very tempted, as I spoke about, going the reverse of essentially what I just said, of planning for the future. I really think that if you have a player in which you think is going to start 2 games this week in the team that's top of the league, it's hard for me not to go for that triple captain, as opposed to hoping that later on in the season a person like Haaland, when he doubles in, I think 36 against Palace and someone else, might be Forest, that it's hard for me to wait for that fixture when I know that I can take the here and now with a pretty good fixture with Arsenal doubling. So look, going to quickly transition into the formation. Look, it's not a desirable formation that a lot of people have gone this year, but the formation that I'm going is a 5-4-1 with having that in mind, of trying to limit the transfers and limit the movement. So I think, as everyone would allude to, triple Arsenal is a non-negotiable. I think ownership of Arsenal is going to be around 400-500% this week when you consider captains and triple captains. Look, I currently have the triple captain on Gabriel. Obviously hasn't deterred me too much from the captaincy issue of last game week, but as I said, looking at the here and now, and I think Gabriel is going to play 180 minutes over the next 2 games. I think over the 2 games they've got a combined clean sheet percentage of about 80-something%. So even if they get 1 clean sheet, and which is a 6-pointer for Gabriel, that's bearing in mind no bonus, no goal, no defensive contributions, and then a 2-pointer in the next. That would still be an 8-pointer, which, you know, not great, but is still somewhat of a pass mark. On the top end of the spectrum, Gabriel could come out and get 20 points over those 2 fixtures. So I haven't 100% confirmed, and I think, again, from that experts video that I looked at from FPL Focal, I think 40% were using the triple captainship. Not to say that all 40% were going to be on Gabriel, but I would say of that 40%, about 90% of them would be on Gabriel. And then I'm going to have Rice as my vice captain. Chalobah have been extremely underwhelming, bringing him in. Chelsea have avoided clean sheets like the plague. Don't have any other option but to have Virgil in there at the Stadium of Light against Sunderland. I don't think that that's a great fixture for Liverpool with both Virgil and Wirtz, but again, sort of just weathering the storm this week, and then Liverpool's fixtures start to turn, and then some of my teams start to look a little bit better week to week. But as I sort of touched on in the last video, that momentum of having multiple options and sort of who to bench each week, it hasn't been there over the last couple of game weeks. So there isn't really, five back hasn't been a very desirable formation this year, but we'll see how we go. Still undecided on the goalkeeper, Dubravka and Verbruggen. I don't think there's much in it. I think that's going to be a late decision on my end, but pretty easy. Wilson against City, Thiago versus Arsenal. They're pretty easy bench options, and especially if I'm going to triple captain Gabriel, I don't see any real point in putting Thiago into it. So, look, the blank game week 31, I've sort of alluded to the hidden danger of people transferring in players for the here and now, but there's actually one other danger that I don't think many people are starting to think of, and that's who they're going to bench and who they're going to get rid of if they're dead-ending in 31. So if you actually have a look at my team, I'm carrying triple Arsenal and I'm carrying 2 Man City assets. So that's 5 players in which only fit onto 3 of my bench because I don't have a Raya who takes up a goalkeeper spot. So if you do have, say, a triple Arsenal and Raya is one of them, then you're going to be better suited to dead ending, because you'll be able to use Raya as your goalkeeper on the bench. But for someone who owns 5 outfield players from Arsenal and City, and looking at, I guess, who the value's tied up into, that's Haaland and Gabriel, they're going to be on my bench, and then I'm trying to fight for a spot of Guehi, Rice, Timber, and Guehi. I think Guehi's going to go before that sort of dead end or close to it, but I think Timber or Rice could come straight back into my side. So I think these are some of the things in which people aren't necessarily thinking about at the moment. And again, if you do have 5 or 6 assets between Arsenal and Man City, then you really should be thinking about either offloading some of them now when you do make transfers, and or starting to roll with that in mind. But again, I am seeing a lot of managers at the moment having, playing with friends or just watching, overall FPL content. There are a lot of people still very active with their transfer use. So lastly, I just quickly wanted to go through some transfers. So again, I'm going to roll this week, but if we go through goalkeepers, I don't really want to touch on, but from a defender perspective, I still have a lot of money tied up in my defence and probably not going to change over the next couple of weeks. I wouldn't potentially like it this way, but I'm going to end up getting rid of Guehi at some point for a cheaper defender. But for anyone who is looking at defenders, the likes of Hill at 3.9 million, Senesi and Anderson from Fulham, I think, are all sort of great cheaper options. The premium, you can't go past any Arsenal assets. I would be avoiding the likes of sort of Chalobah as his fixtures start to sort of turn in the next 2 weeks, and look, he hasn't been a great hold for me even with the great fixtures. Guehi, I think, again, is definitely an avoid. He's been a great asset for me, but outside of clean sheets, that sort of DEFCON that he got at Palace, and also those attacking returns have seemed to have diminished. Tarkovsky, again, probably an avoid. And then even the big ones for me, the Crystal Palace assets like your Munoz and Lacroix, they're an avoid for me as well. Again, with them blanking in 31 also, looking at my team, I can't afford to have them in there. I haven't even mention the fact that I've also got Mark Yu, who's just been a dead spot on my bench, who's also going to have to go at some point as well. Look, if we go quickly into the midfield, Bruno's a must-hold. Semenyo, big avoid for me. Rice got in my side, but he's looking as a monitor/avoid at the moment. Bruno Guimaraes and Morgan Rogers have been the most frustrating assets for me to watch in FPL this year. Haven't necessarily had the underlying numbers, but they just continue to return. Rogers is someone that I'm potentially looking at as a switch for Enzo in a game week or two's time. But I'm, again, trying to stay quite flexible. Look, Palmer at the moment, with a price rise last night, I think he's up to 10.5. Too hard basket for me to get into the side. I know many are going to be sort of chasing him. But again, 2 penalties, expected goal involvements weren't that high. I still think he's somewhat of an avoid, but I know he's a penalty taker and is an exciting asset to have as well. And then look, you can't really go past your budget stability picks at the moment, which in my opinion are sort of your Garner from Everton, even though Everton I don't think look great, and Anderson from Forest. They essentially start on 4 points because they're just hitting DEFCON for fun. And then I want to bring your attention to I wouldn't say the Smokies, because I think a lot of people are going to be looking at them, but Dango, Otara and Sharda. I was having a look at sort of their XGI sort of side by side, because I think that if not Rogers, there's a high likelihood that one of them enter my side. Or look, if I still feel like Wilson is sort of over that purple patch, then if I do want to pull the trigger with using transfers, then it could be a straight swap for Dango and Wilson, and then potentially, if cash permits, Enzo up to Rogers, which I think that would actually be perfect cash if I did that right now, but price changes are obviously going to occur as well. And then lastly, in the forwards, look, Hugo still looks incredible. If we go into forwards, Hugo still looks incredible. Like, he missed a massive chance with that header, and seems to be creating. Look, I think João Pedro, again, one of those players that has scored over the last couple of weeks, but I think got probably a little bit lucky. 2 assists on the weekend from penalties. That's not going to happen every week. I do somewhat question his finishing, but look, he scored 122 points and sitting there in third. I think Hugo, though, would be able to chase him down pretty quickly. Look, the only real thing that I'm looking at the moment, again, is probably Mark Yu in and making way for Krupi. Krupi's still getting a lot of minutes and creating a lot. Like, I think he missed like a 0.6 XG chance on the weekend, so that's another one that I'm looking at. But look, I don't think it's any secret that the 3-4-3 formation hasn't been the way to go this year. I still want to tie a lot of my perceived and expected value into the midfield. I probably want to alleviate some of that value that I've got tied up in the defence at the moment to free up some moves into the midfield, and potentially to upgrade that Mark Hughes spot to like a Krupi or something, which I could do now, but I want that additional cash sort of sat there if I'm to downgrade one of my defence, which or defenders, sorry, sounded American there, which Chalobah's and or Enzo are going to be making way soon as well. So that's already another 2 transfers that I'm going to have to think about and plan for as well. Look, in closing, I acknowledge the rank drop. Obviously not ideal, but the season is far from over, and hopefully I'm making the right considerations and right moves now for sort of the next 3, 4, 5, and all the way up to sort of 8 game weeks. Big lesson for me, and a bit of a humbling one with the captain, and trying to probably get a little bit too sneaky. And then look, in closing thoughts, my plan is to roll and roll when possible over the next couple of weeks with 3 Chelsea that I want to get rid of, and then some transfers that I'm going to have to dead end into. So they're going to be really pivotal for me over the next couple of game weeks. Look, I am still around to answer questions right up until the deadline, so would love some more interaction. I got some last week, which was great. If you could leave a like and subscribe, that would be fantastic if you enjoyed the content. But again, would love to chat to anyone in the comments. I'm also on X, which is the same, Bazball FPL. But looking forward to seeing you next time. Good luck in Double Game Week 26, and it'll be interesting to see how many of you are potentially considering or using a triple captaincy on one of the Arsenal assets. No worries. Catch you later.